I mean, my parents were mercifully free of the problem of religion. You know, they brought me up in this kind of a-religious atmosphere, which is their greatest gift to me, I think.
And that's why you've gotten in so much trouble with every religious group.
I had to, there was, you noticed that. But no, there were, like many, many Indian Muslims, they saw that phrase, Indian Muslim, as a description of a community, not of a theology. And they certainly didn't wish to live in a state dominated by a religious belief. That's to say, they saw themselves as Indians first, and Muslims, way down the line. And after all, they weren't by any means alone. I mean, in fact, even today, there are many more Muslims living in India than live in Pakistan. So it was a decision made by many people, but it split families. In my family, for instance, half my family went to Pakistan, the other half stayed in India. Sometimes it broke marriages. One member of the marriage wished to go, the other one wished to stay. So it was a terrible rupture. And then, of course, it was hugely exacerbated by the terrible massacres that took place at that time.
And you said once that of the three countries that you grew up in, India, Pakistan, and England, Pakistan was the one you felt most like an outsider.
Yeah, Pakistan sucks. I mean...
well, at least you're being diplomatic, thank God.
Could you be more straightforward? I don't think I got that one.
No, I know, I know it's one of America's current two allies in the world, but...
Saudi Arabia and Pakistan.
We're on a roll now.
But it sucks. And especially if you're used to India, which is a rich, complicated, open society full of colors and smells and excess and rich, kind of real richness of life experience. And you cross the frontier into Pakistan, which used to be the same place, 56 years ago, used to be the same place. Now you feel a kind of, in a cultural sense, you feel a kind of airlessness. That there's no air to breathe. People aren't allowed to say what they think. They aren't allowed to do what they like. Women and men are segregated. There's a gigantic drug culture because it's one of the world's major producers of opium and heroin. There's an exploding AIDS problem, which is not looked at because, of course, Muslims don't get AIDS. There's a highly gangsterized urban society. There's political corruption on both the civilian and the military side. There's economic corruption so great that 75% of the economy is now believed to be the black economy rather than the overt white economy. There is enormous regional dislike. The Sindhis don't like the Punjabis. Nobody likes the Balochis. Everybody hates the Northwest frontier where they're fundamentalist and pro-Taliban. It sucks.
But there you are. You go to England, V.S. Naipaul goes to England, he falls in love with English culture, you fall in love with American culture. The Wizard of Oz, you've said, is one of the key works in your life.
Well,
and American rock and roll seems to be important to you too.
Yes, this is all true. This is all true. I'm essentially a very low-grade individual.
Well, what happened to Dickens and all of those? What happened to Jane Austen? What happened to...
They're there.
Oh,
they're
okay.
there, They're there. I do not diss Jane Austen or Charles Dickens. I have to tell you, though, one of the proudest moments of my life was I wrote a piece about the Wizard of Oz, which originally appeared in the New Yorker, and I got a fan letter from a munchkin. I mean, actually, from Mr. and Mrs. Munchkin, they'd both been in the movie. They were now very elderly, obviously. They were living in a J.C. Penney retirement home in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. The lady, the man was called Manfred Raber, and his wife, that she had been an extra. She'd just been in the big Ding Dong, the Witch is Dead sequence, but he had been an important, you'll remember him, featured player. He played the Munchkin coroner. If you remember, he had that hat like that, and the scroll, and he says, she's not only really dead, she's really most sincerely dead, etc. Let the news at once be spread, the wicked old witch at last is dead. Anyway, him, right? So he writes me a letter saying he liked my piece. And as a gift, he includes in the letter a color Xerox of his big scene. So there he is in his hat and his scroll, and as you remember, he's got this scroll, and on it in big Gothic letters it says Certificate of Death, right? And underneath, he's filled in my name.
Whoa.
So, so I now have a Munchkin death certificate.
Munchkin patois.
And for a minute I think, how funny is this, and then I think, no, he's this elderly guy in Fort Lauderdale, and not much has happened in his life since The Wizard of Oz, because he's been working at J.C. Penney. And he sits in this retirement home, and by his bedside he's got this big stack of color Xeroxes of his big scene, and he's firing off letters to everybody in the world and filling in their names, So anyway, I framed it. It's one of my proudest possessions.